Thank you very much. My time has expired. Again, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, colleges that offer a high-quality education and colleges that offer a low-quality education have essentially the same access to federal loan money. And this easy access to student loan dollars gives colleges far less incentive to contain costs, far less incentive to improve educational quality, and far less incentive to discourage students from taking on too much debt. We also have seen from some recent reports that some for-profit colleges that serve veterans, students who are the first in their family to attend college, are even willing to commit outright fraud in order to get access to federal loan dollars. Now, one important part of the solution, I think, is to give colleges some skin in the game on student loan repayment. And as Senator Reed testified, he and Senator Durbin and I have been working on a bill on this for a long time, and a risk-sharing bill. And I'm very pleased that the chairman is considering whether or not we should do risk-sharing as we do the Higher Education Act. Now, what I want to think about, though, are what the trade-offs are in the act when we do that. So, Dr. Weber, I've looked at your work about modeling out the impact of risk-sharing, and you've made it clear that you believe it could reduce student default rates, student loan default rates. I know that you also support risk-sharing, Mr. Kelly, and you point out that this kind of proposal could replace some existing regulations. In principle, I agree. Smarter, simpler rules that align market incentives are better than complex technocratic rules that don't change incentives. But it's critical we get the details right, so this is where my question focuses. Dr. Weber, when you considered the impact of risk sharing, did you assume that the current higher ed regulations would remain in place?
I did.
So did your research reach any conclusions on whether implementing risk sharing would make other federal regulations unnecessary?
No, that was in the nature of the research is because I was, trying to evaluate a hypothetical. I could really only handle one hypothetical at a time.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Good to move only one variable at a time. Okay. So Mr. Kelly has argued that instituting risk sharing on student loan repayment, the federal government might be able to do away with certain key accountability measures, as Ms. Wang discussed, like cohort default rates, the 90-10 rule, and the gainful employment regulation. So I just want to think about what we know about the impact of those higher ed regulations. Dr. Weber, you noted in your research that when strict default standards were put in place back in 1991, that cohort default rates dropped 33% in a single year. Would you be concerned about rolling back a measure that had such a substantial and positive impact?
Well, first I would say that that was also happened to take place during an economic recovery, so there was a disentangling. I would certainly be concerned. However, I feel that as Mr. Kelly had mentioned before, that the access to Title IV funding is a very blunt measure that only incentivizes, a very specific type of institution who is, above the 30% threshold. It does absolutely nothing for those under it. So we could actually even keep the existing regulation and just add incentives for those under the threshold.
All right, it's a very helpful point. Thank you, Dr. Weber. I just want to be clear on this. Simple structural rules to make this market work better is something that both Democrats and Republicans should support. But before we even consider eliminating any of the rules that have actually helped stem the rising tide of defaults, we should be certain that we are putting in place a stronger system that will help students. There may be a path here, but we want to be very careful that we are not making things worse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks,